The docking clamps shuddered through the hull as the transport latched onto the alien station. Lieutenant Adrian Cole steadied himself against the vibrating bulkhead, masking his unease with the same calm detachment he wore on every mission. He had crossed voids before, stepped onto worlds where the air itself seemed intent on killing him. But this was different. This time he was an envoy, not a soldier. A handshake, not a rifle, was supposed to secure survival. The hatch cycled open with a hiss, and a spill of pale violet light flooded the corridor. The atmosphere of the station was thinner than Earth's, tinged with a metallic scent that clung to the back of his throat. Adrian stepped through, boots echoing against the smooth alloy floor, and found himself under the gaze of beings who seemed sculpted from glass and shadow. The Sereti, humanity's newest and perhaps most dangerous neighbors, had skin that shimmered faintly with bioluminescent patterns. Every movement was deliberate, every expression restrained, as though emotion itself was a private language not to be shown carelessly. Adrian followed the procession toward the Grand Hall, his mind replaying the ambassador's warning. One wrong gesture, one misplaced phrase, could topple the fragile negotiations. He told himself to keep his eyes forward, to project the composure expected of him. And then he saw her. She was among the delegation, taller than most of her kin, with eyes that glowed like captured starlight. Her markings pulsed faintly along her cheekbones, shifting in delicate rhythms. Something about her presence tugged at him, not the austere majesty of the others, but a quiet, unguarded radiance that made it impossible for him to look away. His careful mask cracked. He stared. The moment stretched longer than he realized. Her head tilted, gaze locking onto his with a sharpness that suggested she'd noticed his lapse in discipline. The procession halted at the hall's threshold. She stepped closer, her voice soft yet carrying the resonance of someone used to silence. "Why are you staring at me?" His training screamed at him to offer some diplomatic evasion, but the truth leapt free before he could stop it. "Because you're dazzling." The word hung in the air, raw and unpolished, completely unlike the calculated precision of the Sereti. For a heartbeat, he feared he had doomed not only himself, but perhaps the entire mission. Then, impossibly, her patterns shifted, an unsteady flicker across her skin that resembled a human blush. She averted her gaze, shoulders tensing, as though embarrassed by the very response her people were never supposed to reveal. The silence that followed pressed down on him. The rest of the delegation remained unreadable, their expressions as smooth as glass. A low chime announced the beginning of the negotiations, breaking the tension, and the group moved again into the chamber. She lingered for a fraction of a second before following, her eyes flicking toward him one last time, faint light still pulsing across her cheeks. Adrian forced himself to focus as the talks began. The hall was an amphitheater of cold elegance, its walls rippling faintly with embedded circuitry that resembled veins beneath translucent skin. At the center, holographic projections of trade routes and disputed sectors floated in shifting geometric arrays. Words filled the chamber, translated seamlessly through earpieces, each phrase as sharp and careful as a scalpel. Humanity sought access to the Sereti jump lanes, vital corridors through which the survival of dozens of colonies depended. The Sereti, in turn, demanded proof of restraint, of predictability, qualities humanity had never been known for. Adrian sat behind the ambassador, silent, watchful, replaying the moment in the corridor. He should not have spoken, yet the memory of her faint blush kept intruding, warming him in the cold expanse of the chamber. The Sereti prided themselves on discipline, but she had revealed something unscripted, something fragile. That glimpse unsettled him more than the harshest battlefield. Hours passed in careful exchanges, promises and counter-promises etched into glowing agreements. When the session finally recessed, Adrian was dismissed with the rest of the human entourage. He stepped out into a quieter corridor, stretching the tension from his shoulders, when a faint shimmer of light caught the edge of his vision. She was there again, standing apart from her peers, her gaze fixed on him. No words came at first, only silence laden with curiosity and something else he couldn't name. Then she spoke, barely above a whisper, as though the station itself might overhear, Your kind speaks too openly. It is reckless. Yet, her eyes narrowed slightly, glowing brighter. It is also different. Adrian inclined his head, the faintest smile tugging at his mouth. Different isn't always bad. Her markings flickered again, betraying another ripple of emotion before she caught herself. She turned quickly, her stride purposeful, but her hesitation at the corner betrayed that she had wanted to say more. He watched her disappear into the violet-lit corridor, the echo of her voice lingering. Adrian exhaled slowly, a realization settling over him. The negotiations would be fraught, alliances tested, but something more personal had ignited in that fleeting exchange. He wasn't sure if it was a bridge or a precipice, only that he was already stepping onto it. The ambassador's words returned to him. One wrong gesture, one misplaced phrase, could ruin everything. And yet, perhaps it was precisely the wrongness, the human tendency to speak without calculation, that might shift the balance. He had seen the proof in the shimmer of her skin, the quiet crack in her composure. As the station's artificial day cycled toward its dim twilight, Adrian found himself restless. He lay awake in the quarters assigned to the human delegation, listening to the low hum of the environmental systems. Beyond the thin walls, he knew the Cerati moved with their quiet grace, every step measured. And somewhere among them, she carried the same uneasy weight he did. For the first time since arriving, Adrian allowed himself to feel something other than duty. Curiosity, anticipation, a fragile hope that their paths would cross again, not as envoy and alien, but as two beings who had glimpsed something unexpected in one another. Sleep claimed him at last, though his final thought clung stubbornly to the memory of her blush. It was not the kind of detail one forgot easily. It was a beginning, though whether it was of connection or conflict, he could not yet tell. Adrian noticed her before she spoke. The negotiation chamber had emptied, leaving only the quiet hum of translation pylons and the faint shimmer of dissolving holograms. He lingered, cataloging the day's exchanges in his mind, when a ripple of pale light brushed across the corner of his vision. She stood near the far archway, hands clasped, gaze fixed not on him, but on the residual glow of the projections. The moment he moved, her eyes met his, steady and unflinching. "You choose your words differently," she said, her voice low, but carrying an edge of curiosity. "Your leaders calculate. You do not." Adrian almost laughed, but stopped himself. Instead, he replied evenly, "We try to mean what we say. Sometimes it works against us. Sometimes it builds trust." Her markings flickered with a hesitant rhythm, betraying thought. "Among my people, words are not weapons nor gifts. They are architecture, built carefully, never left unfinished. To speak without measure is to risk collapse." "And yet you asked me why I stared," he countered gently. "That wasn't careful. That was human." Her gaze faltered just slightly, and in that faint hesitation Adrian sensed the same tension he carried, the recognition that their encounter had stepped outside the rules of diplomacy. She did not answer. Instead, she gestured for him to follow. They walked through the quieter arteries of the station, corridors washed in lavender light. Unlike the grand halls, these spaces felt more personal, patterned walls etched with faint, shifting glyphs. She stopped before a viewport that revealed the star-washed void beyond. Constellations twisted into unfamiliar patterns, alien suns flickering in the abyss. "Do your kind look at the void this way?" she asked, her tone softening. Adrian folded his arms, eyes fixed on the view. "We see it as dangerous, mostly, but also beautiful. We go there not because it's safe, but because it's not." The flicker of her bioluminescence deepened, a slow pulse that seemed to mirror the rhythm of her breathing. "You chase danger willingly. We avoid it. That is why my elders doubt your species' place among us." "Maybe they're right," Adrian admitted. Then, with a faint smile, he added, "But sometimes what people doubt is exactly what makes us worth having around." She turned toward him fully then, her features composed yet her skin betraying the faintest shimmer. "Your confidence is unrestrained. It unsettles me." "And you unsettle me," Adrian said without hesitation. Her eyes widened at the bluntness, and again the faint flush of light crawled across her cheeks. She looked away, struggling to conceal it, but the attempt only deepened his sense that the gap between their peoples might be smaller than either side claimed. Over the next days, their paths crossed again and again, sometimes in the margins of formal gatherings, other times in corridors where no one else seemed to notice them. They spoke cautiously at first about art, about history. She described the Sarati rituals of memory, where ancestors' deeds were preserved through coded patterns of light displayed on their skin. Adrian, in turn, told her about human songs, about voices raised in imperfect harmony that carried truths too large for words. Her expression during those moments was something between disbelief and wonder, as though she could not decide whether his species' openness was folly or genius. Once, he invited her to share a meal in the neutral mess hall assigned to the human delegation. She hesitated, glancing at the room's sterile furnishings, before accepting. She tasted the synthetic bread and spice stew with restrained curiosity, her glow flickering as though parsing each unfamiliar flavor. When he asked if it was too strong, she shook her head slowly. "It is chaotic, but not unpleasant." He laughed. "That's humanity in a sentence." The sound startled her at first, then softened her posture. "You make noise to show joy," she observed, half incredulous. "We make silence." Later, when their hands brushed as he passed her a utensil, she pulled back quickly, markings flickering in a storm of pale light. Adrian pretended not to notice, but the warmth of the fleeting contact lingered long after the meal ended. Yet beneath these quiet exchanges, tension mounted. Adrian felt it in the stiff glances of Sarati officials who lingered too long whenever he spoke with her, in the clipped tone of his own ambassador who reminded him, without naming her, that their mission was fragile and every distraction dangerous. Rumors whispered through the human contingent. The Sarati considered emotional entanglements a liability, especially with outsiders. One evening, as the negotiations stalled over trade concessions, Adrian found her waiting again in the corridor outside the chambers. Her shoulders were tense, the usual symmetry of her posture marred by unease. "There are eyes on us," she said quietly. "Too many. They see our exchanges as breaches, as risks to the structure we are building." Adrian studied her, noting the way her glow betrayed both anxiety and defiance. "Do you see it that way?" Her pause stretched, long enough for the station's hum to fill the silence between them. Finally she answered, "I see something I cannot name. That makes me afraid." He stepped closer, close enough to see the shifting constellations in her eyes. "Fear doesn't always mean stop. Sometimes it means this is the thing worth doing." Her lips parted as if to argue, but no words came. The faint blush returned, softer this time, a reluctant surrender to the truth she couldn't entirely deny. Before either could say more, a chime echoed down the corridor, an urgent summons for both delegations. She turned sharply, the mask of composure falling back into place, and began walking. Adrian followed, his thoughts racing. Their conversations had started as sparks in the quiet margins, but now those sparks brushed dangerously close to flame. As they entered the chamber again, surrounded by the scrutiny of diplomats and rivals alike, Adrian realized the true conflict was no longer just about trade routes or political leverage. It was about the fragile, unspoken bond forming between two beings whose people demanded restraint. And that bond was becoming impossible to ignore. The negotiations resumed, voices sharp, promises heavy with calculation. Yet Adrian's focus drifted, drawn again to the subtle pulse of light across her features. Each flicker felt like a secret language he was only beginning to learn, one he knew could cost them dearly, and yet one he had no intention of abandoning. The tension finally broke, not between Adrian and her, but in the chamber, where the Sarati counselors had grown weary of human insistence. Accusations hung like blades in the air, sharpened by the translation systems, until every word landed too cleanly. The ambassador kept his poise, but Adrian could see it in the tightening of his jaw. The talks teetered on collapse. When the session adjourned, the Sarati delegation moved as one body, smooth and unreadable. She lingered only a moment, her gaze seeking Adrian's across the crowded floor before being caught by a superior's hand on her shoulder. The older Sarati bent close, words inaudible, yet the message clear. Her posture stiffened. She did not look back as she was led away. That night the ambassador came to Adrian's quarters. No pleasantries, no pretenses. Whatever rapport you believe you've built with her, it ends. Do you understand? Adrian met his superior's eyes. With respect, sir, she's more than rapport. She's listening. She's curious. That could matter. What matters, the ambassador snapped, is stability. The Sarati fear unpredictability more than war itself. If they suspect you of fraternizing, they will see it as proof of humanity's recklessness. That puts every colony, every treaty at risk. This is not personal, Lieutenant. It cannot be. But it was. Adrian said nothing, though the weight of unsaid words pressed against his chest long after the ambassador left. The following days were a hollow blur. She was present in the chamber, but never near. Her eyes no longer sought his. Her glow stayed muted, a mask of perfect composure. It should have been easier, but it wasn't. Each silence between them felt heavier than words. Then the crisis came. A Sarati scout fleet intercepted a rogue faction on the edge of contested space. Rebels who rejected peace with humanity and saw diplomacy as weakness. Their ships advanced toward the very lanes under negotiation. Panic rippled through both delegations. The chamber filled with raised voices, Sarati accusing humans of provoking the hostility. Humans insisting they had no part in it. Adrian caught fragments of the strategic debate, but his focus shifted when she entered, called forward by her leaders. She was no mere diplomat's ornament, as he had first assumed. She was a tactician, her insights sought in moments of peril. She spoke with measured clarity, recommending containment strategies, defensive postures. Adrian listened, struck by how easily she bridged theory with resolve. Yet beneath the steady cadence of her words he sensed unease, because the Sarati proposed to act alone, excluding human assistance entirely. That evening, unable to restrain himself, Adrian sought her in the quieter levels of the station. He found her standing before a bank of glowing consoles, her patterns shifting with restless energy. "You knew about the rebels," he said softly. Her eyes flicked toward him, then back to the screens. "I suspected." Their rhetoric spread quietly, but I underestimated their reach. She drew a slow breath, markings dimming. "Our leaders will not allow your people to intervene. They fear your unpredictability will escalate the conflict. And you?" Her silence answered for her. Adrian stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You told me words are architecture. So let me give you one: trust. Without it, your defenses will collapse. With it, maybe we build something that lasts." Her jaw tightened, but her glow betrayed the flicker of a storm within her. "You speak as though it is simple. It is not." "It never is," Adrian replied. "But it's worth the risk." Her hand hovered over the console, then fell away. For a moment she allowed herself to meet his eyes fully, no restraint, no mask. "If I let you stand with me, Adrian Cole, and we fail, your kind and mine will fall further apart than they ever were. Do you understand that?" He nodded. "I do. And if we succeed?" Her lips curved into the faintest, sorrow-tinged smile. "Then perhaps you were right to stare." The alarm klaxons cut through the stillness, summoning both delegations to the command gallery. The rebel fleet had accelerated, faster than anticipated. A decision had to be made. As Sarati commanders debated, Adrian's ambassador argued for human involvement, citing shared survival. The council resisted, their fear palpable. It was she who broke the deadlock. "We deny them aid," she said, "and we prove their accusation true, that we fear them more than we value alliance. We let them fight with us, and we test whether trust is strength." Her voice trembled only slightly, a tremor most would miss. Adrian heard it clearly. The chamber erupted in divided voices, but the decision was forced by urgency. A joint mission was authorized, though grudgingly. Adrian was named liaison. She was appointed his partner. When they left the gallery, walking side by side for the first time in days, words felt unnecessary. The air between them thrummed with what both had risked. In the hangar, amid the hiss of pressure locks and the gleam of ships readied for launch, she finally spoke. You endanger everything by being what you are, she murmured, almost accusing, yet not without warmth. Adrian strapped into the harness of the small strike craft, meeting her gaze with steady resolve. And you endanger everything by letting me. Her glow shifted, hesitant, but alive. We are reckless. Maybe that's the only way forward. The craft shuddered as it disengaged from the station. Stars swept into view, the rebel fleet glinting in the distance like a storm of knives. The mission was only beginning, but already Adrian knew the deeper battle was not just against an enemy fleet. It was for the fragile, impossible bond forged between them. And as the engines roared, he realized he had no intention of surrendering it. The strike craft bucked under acceleration, stars dragging into white streaks across the canopy. Adrian's hands gripped the controls, his breaths measured, every movement precise. Beside him, she monitored tactical displays, her fingers gliding across alien glyphs with unerring discipline. They moved as two halves of a whole, his instinctive adjustments balancing her calculated precision. Neither spoke at first, the silence taut, filled only by the thrum of engines and the approaching shadow of the rebel fleet. The rebels came into view as shards of light, their ships lean and sharp, formations fluid in a way that suggested both aggression and desperation. Adrian felt a chill. These were not the patient diplomats of the council. These were zealots who saw alliance as betrayal. If they cut through, the fragile treaty would collapse before it was even written. We cannot match their speed, she said, her voice steady but threaded with urgency. Their design is stripped for efficiency. No armor, no restraint. Adrian's lips quirked. Then we don't try to match them. We outthink them. She shot him a sidelong look, markings flickering with doubt. Your improvisation is reckless. It's human, he countered, fingers dancing across controls. And it works sometimes. They entered the debris field of an abandoned mining outpost, jagged fragments tumbling in slow arcs. Adrian steered their craft into the clutter, weaving between metal shards. The rebels followed, confident in their superior maneuverability. But Adrian wasn't running. He was shaping the battlefield. Adjust shield harmonics, he told her. Shift them to resonate with the largest fragments. She hesitated, then complied. A hum filled the cabin as the shield shimmered, magnetizing debris into erratic clusters. The field turned treacherous, paths narrowing into death traps. The rebel formation faltered, one ship clipping a shard and spiraling away in a burst of flame. Another veered too sharply, colliding with its own wingmate. Her eyes widened, patterns flashing in astonishment. You created chaos on purpose. Adrian grinned despite the danger. Chaos is where we thrive. The Cerati fleet arrived moments later, using the confusion to encircle the rebels. Precision combined with Adrian's disruption, order aligning with disorder, until the rebels were forced into retreat. Victory came not through overwhelming firepower, but through the collision of two philosophies, hers and his, discipline and unpredictability, woven into a strategy neither could have achieved alone. The strike craft docked back at the station to thunder a silence. Cerati officials regarded Adrian with suspicion, yet none could deny the outcome. Their forces stood unbroken. The rebel fleet had fled. For the first time, the council saw that human recklessness might not be recklessness at all, but a kind of weapon no calculation could duplicate. In the aftermath, Adrian and she were summoned before the assembly. The ambassador spoke first, recounting the mission's success, framing it as proof of potential unity. Then one of the Cerati counselors turned to her. You endorsed this deviation, he said with thinly veiled censure. She held herself tall, her glow steady. I did. And I would again. Without him, we would have faced loss. With him, we prevailed. The council chamber shifted with murmurs, some disapproving, others contemplative. The decision that followed was cautious but undeniable. Negotiations would continue. The alliance was not yet sealed, but the path remained open. Humanity had not been cast out. When they left the chamber, Adrian walked beside her in silence until they reached a quiet overlook above the docking bays. Ships drifted in and out, framed by the endless dark. Only then did he speak. Back there, when you defended me, you didn't have to. She studied him, her expression calm, but her glow betraying a subtle warmth. I told the truth. Your methods unsettled me, but they also saved us. Perhaps your people's unpredictability is not weakness, but another form of strength. Adrian chuckled softly. Careful. That almost sounds like a compliment. Her lips curved faintly, a gesture so small yet so deliberate it felt like a declaration. And if it is? He met her gaze, the memory of their first exchange stirring between them. Then I'll take it the same way I took yours, unexpected and dazzling. The word lingered, carrying them back to that first reckless spark. She looked away quickly, but not before the shimmer of her blush spread across her skin, soft and radiant in the violet light. This time, she didn't hide it. They stood together in the hush of the station, the noise of politics, and war momentarily distant. The treaty was not yet signed, the future uncertain. But in that moment Adrian understood something deeper than strategy or survival. Humanity's strength was not only in ships or weapons, but in the unguarded honesty that could pierce barriers no calculation ever could. She turned back to him at last, her glow calm and steady. Our path forward will not be easy. My people will resist. Yours will push too hard. But perhaps we can build something anyway. Adrian nodded. Then let's build it, one reckless step at a time. The silence that followed was not strained but full, carrying the weight of possibility. Beyond the viewport, the stars stretched on, vast and unyielding. And somewhere among them, a future waited, uncertain, fragile, but theirs to claim if they dared. The alliance had been declared tentative, but the word felt fragile, like glass resting on the edge of a table. Adrian sensed it in every corridor of the Cerati station, the way diplomats lowered their voices when he passed, the way their bioluminescent markings dimmed in suspicion whenever she walked beside him. Victory against the rebels had not erased centuries of caution. It had only opened a door, and doors could close as swiftly as they opened. She moved with composure, though he could see the strain in the patterns across her skin. Each flicker carried the weight of scrutiny. She had risked her standing to defend him, and though the council had not censured her outright, the undertone of their disapproval hung in the air. It pressed between them like a third presence in every exchange. One evening, Adrian found her in the observation deck overlooking the station's starfield. Her hands were clasped tight, her glow faint, her posture uncharacteristically tense. He approached quietly, but she spoke before he could. My people question me now, she admitted, her voice low. They ask if I have been compromised. They fear I am too willing to see, as you see. Adrian stopped a few steps away, unwilling to crowd her. And what do you think? Her gaze lifted, eyes bright against the darkness beyond the viewport. I think truth is not compromise, but truth can destroy as easily as it can build. He nodded slowly. That's something humans know too well. Their silence lingered, not empty, but heavy with what both wanted to say and dared not. Beyond the glass, distant stars pulsed in slow rhythms, as if echoing her glow. Adrian reached out, his hand hovering in the air between them. She did not take it, but she didn't step away either. That was enough. The next cycle, the crisis came from within. A faction of Cerati officials petitioned to suspend the talks, citing human instability and the danger of emotional entanglements clouding judgment. Adrian listened from the human side of the chamber as her name was spoken openly, her association with him wielded as evidence. His chest tightened, every instinct urging him to speak, to defend her, but he knew his words would only harden their suspicions. She stood before the council, her glow steady despite the weight pressing against her. If your fear is of honesty, then your fear is misplaced, she said. The humans are reckless, yes, but in their recklessness is courage. They dare to say what we hide. I have not been compromised. I have been shown another way to see. If that frightens you, perhaps it is not me who has changed, but you who refuse to. Murmurs rippled across the chamber. Some marks flared with indignation, others dimmed with uncertainty. The decision was delayed, but the fracture had deepened. Afterward, Adrian found her alone, Her composure finally cracked. Her markings flared in quick, uneven bursts. "I have endangered everything," she whispered. He shook his head. "No. You've proven something they can't yet admit, that honesty has a place here. They'll resist it, but they can't unsee it now." Her eyes searched his, desperate for certainty. "And if they cast me out, then you won't stand alone," he said simply. Her glow steadied, faint but resolute, as though those words anchored her. The days that followed were tense, the negotiations suspended while both sides regrouped. In that pause, Adrian and she stole what moments they could, walking the quieter halls, speaking in hushed tones about everything except politics. She told him of her childhood beneath crystal canopies that glowed with ancestral light. He told her of nights on Earth where the air smelled of rain and the sky burned with colors at dawn. They were fragments, small offerings, of who they were beyond envoy and tactician. Each story was a bridge, fragile but real. Yet the shadow of decision loomed. Adrian knew the council's patience would not last. A choice would be forced, either to bind humanity into the Cerati network or to sever ties completely. And he knew that she stood on the fault line, her defense of him tethered to the fate of thousands who had never met either of them. The summons came at last. Both delegations assembled in the chamber, tension thick enough to suffocate. The council rose, their patterns stark with gravity. "The humans are reckless," the speaker declared. "They unsettle the balance we have preserved. Yet they have shown resourcefulness we cannot deny. The question is whether we accept this risk into our order." Adrian felt every eye turn toward her, as though her answer alone might tip the scales. She looked once at him, and in that glance he saw her decision crystallize. "We accept," she said, her voice firm, "because balance is not preserved by fear. It is preserved by growth, and growth demands risk. Without the humans, we stagnate. With them, we change, and change is life." The chamber erupted in divided voices, but the council could not ignore her defiance, nor the evidence of the rebels' defeat. After long deliberation, they announced the talks would continue, tentative still, but unbroken. Humanity's place at the table remained. When the assembly dissolved, Adrian and she slipped away into the quieter corridors. Neither spoke at first, the weight of the moment too large for words. Finally, she exhaled softly. "They will not forgive easily. I may never reclaim their full trust." Adrian looked at her, his voice steady. "Then I'll share mine, until it's enough for both of us." Her glow shimmered faintly, not with shame this time, but with something gentler, something hopeful. She turned toward him, her expression unreadable to anyone else, but clear to him now. "Why are you still staring?" she asked quietly, a trace of warmth in her tone. He smiled, the same uncalculated honesty that had started everything. "Because you're dazzling." She did not look away this time. The glow of her blush spread slowly, deliberately, as though she chose to let it happen. And in that choice, Adrian saw the future, not certain, not safe, but alive with possibility. The station's lights dimmed to simulate night, casting long shadows across the corridor. Beyond the walls, stars wheeled in silence, indifferent yet infinite. Between them, two beings stood at the fragile edge of alliance and affection, daring to believe that honesty and risk could rewrite the course of civilizations. And as the quiet stretched between them, it no longer felt fragile. It felt like the beginning of something neither of their peoples could contain. The station did not sleep, though its lights dimmed to mimic rest. Adrian walked its corridors like a ghost, aware of how many eyes tracked him even when none were visible. Since the council's decision to continue talks, he had become both symbol and liability. Whispers followed him, reckless human, dangerous human, necessary human. He wore them all in silence, but every step pressed heavier on his chest. He found her in the archives, a chamber carved into a circle of shifting light. Lattices of glowing patterns floated in the air, ancestral records encoded in living geometry. She stood beneath them, her glow subdued, her expression unreadable. "You shouldn't be here," she said without turning. "I could say the same about you," Adrian replied softly. "But I think we're both tired of should." Her shoulders tightened, then eased. She turned to him at last, eyes bright beneath the swirl of ancestral lights. "They have begun a new petition," she said, "to remove me from the negotiations. They believe my judgment compromised beyond repair." Adrian felt the words strike deep, though he had expected them. "Because of me." "Because of us," she corrected, her tone sharper than her glow. Then she lowered her gaze. "I cannot undo what is begun. I can only decide whether to step forward or be swept aside." He stepped closer, studying the lights above her, patterns etched into memory, endless repetition of order. "Then maybe stepping forward is the only way." Her lips parted as though to argue, but no sound came. Instead, she reached into the lattice and drew down a fragment of light. It flickered in her hand like a living flame. "These are the memories of my people," she said. "Every triumph, every loss, every warning preserved. We are taught to trust them, to let them guide us. But nowhere here is a memory of trusting an outsider. If I choose this path, I walk beyond every map we have." Adrian met her eyes, steady, unflinching. "Then we'll make a new memory, one worth preserving." She studied him, her glow flickering in patterns he no longer read as random, but as conflict, hesitation, yearning. She let the fragment dissolve back into the lattice, then closed the distance between them by a single step. "Your words are dangerous," she murmured. "So is silence," he answered. The air between them held for a long moment, heavy with what neither could fully speak. Then the station shook. A low tremor ran through the floor, the ancestral lights quivering in their suspended patterns. An alarm followed, sharp and insistent. Both turned instinctively toward the corridor. "Rebels," she said, her glow flaring with sudden clarity. "They've breached the perimeter." Adrian felt adrenaline surge like fire through his veins. Then this isn't politics anymore. It's survival. They ran together, the station's corridors alive with rushing Sereti soldiers and the low thrum of defensive systems activating. The command gallery filled with reports of skirmishes along the outer decks. A small strike team had infiltrated, targeting the chamber where the negotiations records were stored. If they succeeded, the fragile alliance would unravel before it began. There would be no proof of the joint victory, no foundation to build upon. The ambassador barked for Adrian to stay back, but he ignored it. He caught her gaze across the chaos, and without words they moved as one. The archives were already under siege when they arrived, rebels cutting through crystalline doors with plasma torches. Adrian dove behind cover, drawing a sidearm, while she activated the control nodes that bent the chamber's light into defensive barriers. The rebels advanced, relentless, their movements efficient and ruthless. "Too many," she said, her voice taut. Adrian leaned around the barrier, firing in short bursts to drive them back. "Then we don't outnumber them. We outthink them again." Her glow flickered with recognition, and she adjusted the nodes. The barriers pulsed, not steady walls, but shifting panels of refracted light. The rebels stumbled, their sensors confused, their vision fractured. Adrian moved through the chaos with practiced instinct, striking where they faltered, driving them back step by step. One rebel broke through the distortion, weapon raised toward her. Adrian's chest tightened, too far, too fast, but she met the threat with sudden precision. Her hand flared with bioluminescent patterns, overloading the control node. A surge of energy blasted the intruder backward, leaving only silence and the smell of scorched alloy. She stood breathing hard, her glow unsteady but fierce. Adrian stared at her, chest heaving, then laughed despite the danger. "Remind me never to underestimate you again." Her lips curved faintly, though exhaustion dimmed her light. "Remind me to always underestimate you. You thrive on proving me wrong." The last of the rebels retreated under the weight of their combined defense. The archives remained intact, the memories preserved. When reinforcements arrived, the danger was over, but the significance was clear. They had defended not only the records, but the fragile hope of unity itself. In the aftermath, the Council could no longer deny what they had witnessed. Humans and Sereti had fought not as strangers, but as partners. The petition to remove her lost its force. Her defiance had become proof of resilience, not weakness. Later, when the station's alarms quieted and the corridors returned to uneasy calm, Adrian found her again on the observation deck. This time, she did not stand apart. She waited for him. "They will question us still," she said, her voice steady. "But now they cannot erase what we did together. It will live in the lattice. It will live in memory." Adrian stepped beside her, the stars vast and endless beyond the glass. "And maybe someday, when they tell that memory, it won't be about recklessness or compromise. It'll just be about trust." Her glow shimmered, soft and deliberate. She turned toward him fully, no hesitation in her eyes. "Why are you staring at me again?" she asked, the question gentle now, almost playful. Adrian's answer came without pause, as true as it had been the first time. "Because you're dazzling." She did not blush this time. She let the glow spread openly, filling the space between them with light. And in that glow, Adrian saw not just her, but the path they had carved together. A path fragile, dangerous, yet unstoppable. The station thrummed quietly around them, its silence filled with possibility. The future remained uncertain, but uncertainty was no longer their enemy. It was their shared horizon, waiting.